Welcome, my friend. Welcome back to yourself. The world outside is quiet tonight. Soft rain against the windows, a faint hum of distant traffic, and that gentle silence that arrives when the day finally lets go. Inside, you breathe a little slower, and something in you begins to settle. You're not here to cram grammar rules or chase perfect pronunciation. You're here to rediscover something older, the rhythm of real speech, the warmth of a voice that carries meaning beyond words. It's a kind of wisdom that has been passed quietly through generations. My grandfather understood that rhythm. Every evening he would sit by the fire after work, book in hand, reading aloud to himself. He never rushed. Each sentence moved like a slow river. I was a child, pretending not to listen, but every word seemed to find me anyway. He used to say, "The breath is the beginning of every language." Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I do. When you pause before you speak, you let your thoughts catch up with your heart. When you breathe, your voice finds depth. And people feel it, even if they don't know why. When you rush, people hear your words. When you slow down, they hear your soul. That's the English you're learning tonight. The English that sounds alive. Not perfect, but present. Not loud, but steady. The kind that draws people closer without trying. So breathe with me now. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Let the shoulders loosen, the mind quiet down, because fluency isn't a race. It's a rhythm you remember when you finally slow down. That same rhythm moved through my grandfather's voice, then my father's, and now mine. And tonight, through these words, it moves through you. You don't need to force it. You only need to listen and breathe. You're not studying anymore. You're remembering how to speak like someone who believes their voice belongs in the world. So rest easy. Let the language settle into your breath. By morning, you won't just speak English. You'll feel it. Welcome home, to the calm between words. The firelight flickers softly against the old library walls. Shelves of warm books stand like quiet witnesses to the passing of time. The smell of paper and dust fills the air, a familiar comfort that seems to hold the weight of memory. My father used to bring me here on rainy evenings just like this one. He'd pour a cup of tea, place it beside my chair, and tell me to listen. Not to speak, not to ask, just to listen. He believed that every book, every voice, every silence had something to teach if you paid enough attention. He would open a novel, not to test my English or correct my pronunciation, but to show me how a sentence can breathe. He'd read a paragraph, stop halfway, close his eyes and ask, "Do you feel what the writer felt?" And I would nod, even if I didn't fully understand the words, because the feeling was clear. That's how I began to realize something most language learners miss, that learning English isn't about collecting words, it's about feeling them. A single word spoken with calm and conviction can hold more power than 100 spoken in fear, he once told me. A good speaker doesn't try to sound intelligent. He tries to make people feel understood. And that truth stayed with me. Whenever I speak, I remember that language isn't a performance. It's a bridge between two hearts. I think that's why this library feels alive, even when it's silent. Every book on these shelves carries a piece of someone's mind, their fears, their dreams, their laughter. And when you speak English with presence, you join that long conversation that began centuries ago. Outside, the rain continues. The windows hum softly under the wind. My father would sometimes look up from his book and say, "Listen to the sound of the world speaking." And I'd wonder what he meant. Now I understand. The world speaks in every language, and every language begins in silence. That's why tonight, as you rest, your job isn't to memorize or to study. It's simply to listen. To the rhythm, the tone, the flow of English. Your subconscious is learning while you rest. It's noticing patterns, intonation, emotion. It's absorbing the calm behind each word. When you wake, you might not remember every sentence, but your mind will have shifted. You'll find yourself speaking slower, listening deeper, understanding not just the words, but the music inside them. And that's how wisdom passes through generations, quietly, softly, through stories, voices, and the spaces between. Years passed, and I grew older. Life, as it does, began to move faster. The quiet moments became rare, and the world outside became louder. Brighter screens, shorter attention spans, endless noise. But still, in the back of my mind, I could hear that rhythm my father and grandfather carried, the slow, steady cadence of meaning. Sometimes I'd walk past a cafe in the city and see people speaking over one another, words spilling out too quickly, sentences half finished. I'd think about how my grandfather used to pause, how my father would let silence stretch between thoughts. It made me realize that true communication isn't a race to speak, it's an invitation to connect. I began teaching English years later, not by choice, but by accident. A friend asked me to help his colleague prepare for a presentation. She was nervous, fluent on paper, but frozen in conversation. I told her something my father told me. You don't need perfect English. You need presence. We practice not words but breathing. We practice silence. We practice saying less and meaning more. A week later, she gave that presentation. She didn't sound like a native speaker. She sounded like herself, calm, clear, confident, and people listened. That moment changed me. It made me realize that teaching language is really about teaching courage. Every learner I've ever met already has the knowledge they need. What they lack is permission. Permission to sound human. Permission to pause. Permission to speak imperfectly and still be proud. Sometimes I think about how strange it is that words can travel across generations. My grandfather's quiet evenings shaped my father's voice. My father's patience shaped mine. And now, through this recording, maybe I'm shaping yours. Not by teaching rules, but by reminding you that you already know how to speak beautifully. You just forgot to trust yourself. Confidence doesn't come from memorizing sentences. It comes from rhythm, from repetition, from showing up every day and letting English become part of your breath. You don't have to force it. You just have to stay with it. When you speak tomorrow, I want you to notice something. Notice the way people respond when you slow down. Notice how their eyes focus, how their attention sharpens. People are drawn to calmness. They trust voices that move slowly because they sound like truth. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember this. Every fluent person you've ever admired was once a beginner. They stumbled through awkward sentences. They mispronounced words. They hesitated, but they kept going. Every mistake was a brick. Every word another step forward. That's how fluency is built. Not in perfect grammar, but in courage repeated over time. The courage to speak when your voice shakes. The courage to start again when you get it wrong. The courage to be real when it would be easier to hide. Maybe that's the greatest wisdom my family passed down. That language isn't something you learn. It's something you live. Every conversation is a continuation of that ancient rhythm, passed quietly from one human being to another. And as you drift into sleep tonight, that rhythm continues through you. It slows your breath. It calms your thoughts. It teaches without effort. By morning, the words that once felt foreign will begin to sound like home. You are not just learning English. You are remembering your own voice. Sometimes I wonder if my grandfather knew that his quiet evenings by the fire would ripple through time. That one day his words would be carried not just through his son or me, but through voices he would never meet. Voices like yours. It's strange to think about how something as small as the way one person speaks can change how another person feels, even decades later. Maybe that's what language really is, a way to keep each other alive in memory. I can still picture him, the chair by the fireplace, the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall, his hands resting on a book he had read 100 times before. He never looked up when I entered the room, but he always knew I was there. He would say, "Sit, listen. The story sounds different when you stop trying to control it." And then years later, I saw my father in the same chair. Not the same man, not the same time, but the same stillness. The same unspoken understanding that words have weight, that they're meant to be felt, not thrown around. I remember thinking, maybe the real lesson isn't what's in the book, but in how it's read. That's the rhythm I try to pass on now, not just through lessons, but through presence. You see, when you speak English with calm, you don't just sound fluent, you sound trustworthy. You sound like someone people want to listen to. The same calm I felt sitting beside my father, I now try to give to my students. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if all three of us were here again. My grandfather, my father, and me. 3 generations sharing the same room, the same language, the same warmth of firelight flickering across the shelves. The grandfather would begin a story, slow and deliberate. The father would add a reflection, grounding it in meaning, and I would simply listen. Then maybe I'd add something new, a story from this century, a lesson from my own experience, a bridge between the old world and the new, the kind of story that lives in both silence and sound. That's what makes language eternal. Not the words themselves, but the way they continue to evolve, generation after generation. Each of us has a voice that carries the echoes of those before us. Maybe that's why you're here now. Maybe this isn't just about learning English. Maybe it's about remembering that you come from a long line of voices. People who spoke, loved, and dreamed long before you were born. The rhythm of your speech, the softness in your tone, the patience between your pauses, those aren't random. They're part of something ancient. The way you breathe when you speak is the same rhythm your ancestors once used when they sang, prayed, or told stories by firelight. And when you speak English now, you're not losing your identity. You're expanding it. You're adding another chapter to that lineage of sound and meaning. The way you say a word, the pauses you take, the sincerity in your tone, they all carry your heritage, even in a different language. That's what I mean by connection. It's not about grammar or accent. It's about remembering that every voice is part of something much bigger. Every time you speak with intention, you add your own note to a centuries-old melody. So tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, imagine this scene. 3 generations sitting together in quiet harmony. The crackle of the fire, the weight of the books, the faint sound of rain against the window. And through it all, the steady pulse of language connecting past and present, heart to heart. That rhythm now belongs to you. It will move with you in every sentence you speak, every word you write, every silence you allow. Because when you speak from calm and connection, you're not just learning English, you're continuing a legacy. When I was younger, I thought learning a language was only about words, lists, grammar, practice, repetition. But as I grew older, I began to see that the most important lessons were never written down. They live between the words, in the pauses, in the way people listen to each other. My father used to say that a good conversation is like music. The silence between notes matters just as much as the notes themselves. I didn't really understand it back then, but as I started teaching, I realized he was right. The best communicators don't rush to fill every moment with sound. They let their words breathe. You can hear it in the way someone says thank you and really means it, or in how a teacher pauses before giving advice, or even in how a friend stays quiet while you speak, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're giving you space to find your own words. That's one of the greatest secrets of learning English. You don't become fluent by speaking all the time. You become fluent by listening deeply, by noticing how people use rhythm, tone, and timing to create meaning beyond vocabulary. When you slow down and start paying attention, you begin to hear the real English, the one that lives under the surface of grammar books. You hear how emotion shapes words, how trust changes tone, how care is felt even in silence. That's why when I teach, I tell my students not to chase big words. I tell them to master small ones. Words like yes, no, really, I see, because those are the words that hold emotion. Those are the words that make conversations real. Fluency is not the number of words you know. It's the number of hearts you can reach with the words you already have. Sometimes I think about how quiet the world used to be before all the noise, before phones and constant alerts, before videos competing for your attention. My grandfather's world moved slower. There was time to think. There was time to feel. And maybe that's why his words carried so much weight, because he didn't waste them. If you want to speak like that, you have to fall in love with silence. You have to learn to be comfortable with it. Don't rush to fill it. Let it guide you. In that silence, your next sentence will find its shape. And when you finally speak, your words will sound more grounded, more sincere, more human. People won't just hear you. They'll remember you. That's what wisdom really is. Not knowing everything, but saying only what matters. So as you drift further into rest tonight, let this thought stay with you. Every silence teaches something. Every pause shapes your understanding. And every word you choose with care becomes a reflection of who you are becoming. When I think back to those quiet evenings by the fire, I often remember the sound of my grandfather's voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried something powerful, a kind of calm certainty that made you listen, even when he was simply talking about his day. He never spoke to impress, he spoke to connect. Every story he told had a rhythm to it, a gentle patience that invited you in. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was teaching me how to use my own voice long before I ever stepped into a classroom or turned on a microphone. He believed a person's voice was their legacy, not the sound of it, but the energy behind it, what it made others feel. He said, a strong voice isn't the one that shouts the loudest. It's the one that still echoes in people's hearts after you've stopped speaking. And now, as I share these words with you, I wonder how many voices have shaped me without my knowing. Teachers, friends, strangers, people whose names I can't even remember, yet whose tone stayed with me. That's the quiet beauty of communication. It ripples. One calm voice can reach thousands. A single thoughtful sentence can change the direction of someone's day. And when you speak with care, your words can live longer than you do. Think about that. Every time you speak English, every time you share an idea or express a feeling, you're sending something into the world that might travel further than you imagine. That's why I tell my students, speak as if someone who needs hope is listening. Speak as if your words might be the reason someone decides to keep going, because sometimes they will be. The power of language isn't in perfect grammar or flawless pronunciation. It's in intention. It's in the quiet conviction behind every sentence. It's in the way your voice makes others feel safe enough to open up. When you speak with honesty, your accent doesn't matter. Your mistakes don't matter. What matters is that you are real, and people can always feel what's real. That's the legacy of the voice. It's the unseen thread that connects generations, from your grandparents to you, and from you to whoever listens next. So as you rest tonight, let that thought sink in. Every conversation you've ever had, every word you've spoken with sincerity, is part of something much bigger, a living echo that continues long after the sound fades. Your voice carries more than sound. It carries presence. It carries purpose. It carries the story of everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after. Sometimes, when you think about learning English, you picture textbooks, grammar charts, and endless lists of words. But language was never meant to be learned that way. Language was born around firelight, people talking, laughing, sharing their day. That is where the real fluency begins, in the rhythm of connection, not the rules of memorization. Think of every word as a bridge between you and another mind, another story, another heart. Every sentence you build, even the small ones, takes you further across that bridge, and the more often you cross it, the easier it becomes, until one day you're walking across without even thinking. Fluency is not speed. It is comfort, the moment you stop worrying about what comes next and simply enjoy being understood. It is the feeling of peace when your words and your thoughts finally move in the same rhythm. When you speak English with that feeling, that calm flow, something changes inside you. You start noticing the music in the words. You start hearing the melody of phrases that once felt mechanical. You start to think not in translations, but in emotions. And that is when you truly begin to dream in English. Maybe tonight, as your mind drifts into sleep, you'll hear a few familiar phrases echo softly through your dreams. A memory, a voice, a sentence that felt meaningful earlier in the day. That is your subconscious quietly practicing, connecting the sounds, solidifying the patterns, and weaving English into the fabric of who you are. This is how transformation happens, not through pressure, but through quiet repetition, through gentle persistence. Every time you listen, every time you repeat a phrase, every time you absorb the tone of another voice, you're rewiring your mind. You're training your brain to respond not with translation, but with intuition. That's what it means to become fluent. Not memorizing, but feeling. It's like water finding its way through stone, slowly, patiently, but inevitably. So as you rest tonight, imagine every phrase flowing into you like a stream, calm, clear, constant. You're not forcing anything. You're allowing it. And in that allowance, English stops being a subject you study. It becomes part of your nature. Language shapes identity more than we realize. Every word you learn gives you a new way to think, a new lens to see the world. When you begin to speak English with comfort, you start noticing that your thoughts themselves begin to sound different, clearer, more deliberate, more balanced. You discover that each language holds its own personality. In your native tongue, perhaps you feel rooted, earthy, warm, familiar. But in English, something lighter awakens. It's as if you step into a new version of yourself, one that expresses curiosity and calm confidence in equal measure. This is not about replacing who you are. It's about expanding who you can be. Like light passing through glass, you are the same beam, just refracted into new colors. When you switch languages, you open doors inside your mind that would otherwise remain closed. You begin to see that fluency is not only about communication, it's about self-discovery. It teaches patience, empathy, awareness. It trains you to listen deeply, not just to others, but to yourself. And every phrase you speak with care becomes a small act of courage, proof that you are still growing. So tonight, as you drift toward rest, imagine that your thoughts are stretching, expanding, forming connections you cannot yet see. You are building neural bridges between the old and the new, the known and the possible. Each bridge carries a spark of meaning, and those sparks begin to glow brighter as you dream. By morning, you'll wake a little different, not changed completely, but gently upgraded. Your mind will be a touch more flexible, your words a little more natural, your voice a little calmer. This is how real transformation happens, quietly, patiently, one night at a time. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from speaking at all. It comes from listening, really listening, with your full attention. When you listen deeply, people feel it. They soften. They trust you. They start revealing the parts of themselves that usually stay hidden. The truth is, most people aren't used to being listened to. They live in a world of noise, where everyone talks, but few truly hear. So when you offer silence, when you offer presence, you stand out, not by force, but by calmness. This is the same skill that makes someone magnetic when they speak English. They don't rush. They don't fill every pause. They make space. And that space is where connection grows. Each pause says, I'm here. I see you. I care about this moment. Even your breathing plays a role. The more slowly you breathe, the more slowly you speak. The more slowly you speak, the more people lean in to hear you. It's like a rhythm. Inhale, thought. Exhale, silence. That rhythm becomes your signature, your unspoken confidence. And here's something fascinating. Your calm doesn't just affect you. It affects everyone who listens. When you speak slowly, others slow down. When you speak softly, others soften. When you are at ease, they feel at ease too. This is quiet influence, not through persuasion, but through energy. So tonight, as your body relaxes, let your breath match this rhythm. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Notice how your chest rises and falls like gentle waves. This rhythm, your rhythm, is what makes your communication magnetic. Because the secret isn't to try to sound confident, it's to be calm, Confidence is simply calmness felt by others. When you master that, every word becomes meaningful, and every silence becomes golden. And maybe that's what fluency really means. Not the speed of your sentences, but the peace between them. Outside, the rain taps softly against the tall windows of the old London library. Inside, the lamps glow like amber stars scattered between the shelves. It's late, the world has gone quiet, and 3 generations sit together in the hush of turning pages. The grandfather leans back in his wooden chair, the smell of old paper and pipe smoke still clinging to his coat. He reads slowly, his lips moving slightly as though tasting each word. Beside him, the father turns a modern paperback, its pages new and clean, his eyes alive with curiosity. And near the rug, the son, the youngest, lies on his stomach, a stack of children's books spread around him like fallen leaves. For a moment, no one speaks. You can hear the faint creak of the floorboards, the kettle clicking off somewhere in the distance. Then the father glances up and says softly, "Do you know what I love most about reading here?" The grandfather smiles. "What's that, son?" "It feels like we're still learning together," he replies. And the boy, without looking up, mumbles, "I'm learning too." It's simple, but the air changes. 3 voices, 3 ages, bound by one quiet pursuit: learning, understanding, passing it on. The grandfather once struggled to speak confidently at work. The father, years later, taught himself to lead with calm communication. And now the boy listens, absorbing the rhythm of their words, the patience in their tone, the warmth in their pauses. That's what legacy truly is. Not wealth, not possessions, but tone. The tone of your words, the tone of your presence, the tone that says, "I see you, I'm here, and I care." Language becomes inheritance. Every phrase you speak with love becomes a message that outlives you. Maybe your children will not remember every lesson you teach them, but they will remember how your voice made them feel, and that feeling will travel through time, whispering quietly into new lives, shaping new voices. So tonight, as you rest, picture those 3 figures in that warm London library. The grandfather closing his book with a contented sigh, the father pouring the last cup of tea, the child drifting to sleep, the sound of rain steady and kind. This is where English becomes more than language. It becomes belonging. The rain outside has softened into a quiet rhythm, the kind of sound that feels older than the city itself. London hums faintly in the distance, a carriage rolling over wet cobblestone, a door closing somewhere down the street. But in here, the library is its own world. The lamps burn low, their light a warm halo that turns the dust in the air into drifting gold. You can almost hear the wooden shelves exhale, their pages breathing with 1,000 remembered stories. The grandfather's voice still lingers, not as an echo, but as a presence. He once believed that words could build entire worlds, and he was right. His life was proof that quiet conviction can ripple through generations more powerfully than any speech shouted from a stage. He used to say that every sentence you speak plants a seed in someone else's mind, and the kind ones bloom for decades after you're gone. The father carries those seeds now. You can picture him leaning forward at the long oak table, fingertips resting on an open book, the amber light catching the curve of a half smile. He doesn't read to learn anymore. He reads to remember what it felt like to be taught without hurry, to be listened to without judgment. He learned that communication is less about control and more about grace, the willingness to pause, to breathe, to give another person the gift of space. That grace has become his strength. In meetings, in conversation, even in silence, he leads not through volume, but through presence. He has come to understand that authority isn't earned by being right. It's earned by being calm when others forget how. He no longer fears silence. He trusts it, because silence, he's learned, is not emptiness. It's the soil where meaning grows. Across the table, the boy, his son, watches, half dreaming. He doesn't yet know what these moments will mean, but one day he'll feel them. When he stands before a room and chooses patience instead of panic, he'll feel this. When he pauses mid-sentence and lets sincerity finish the thought for him, he'll feel this. When someone tells him, "Your voice makes me feel calm," he'll remember this library, this rhythm, this inheritance of tone, because legacy isn't a thing you leave behind. It's a way of being that keeps walking long after you stop speaking. It's carried in your rhythm, your kindness, your restraint. Every gentle word, every thoughtful pause, every quiet act of care becomes part of a continuum that reaches beyond your lifetime. You are part of that continuum too. You are not learning English only to speak. You are learning to carry emotion through language, to make your calm contagious. Each time you slow down to listen, each time you speak with intention instead of impulse, you continue that same lineage that began long before you. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. The grandfather's steady hands turning a page, the father's quiet smile, the son's wide-eyed wonder. 3 generations connected not by blood alone, but by the sound of understanding passed between them. And now, in your own way, you've joined them. You stand at that invisible bridge between past and present, carrying forward not just a language, but a feeling, the assurance that peace and power can exist in the same breath. You don't need to perform or prove or push. You only need to remember that calmness itself is persuasive, that empathy is fluent in every language. So tonight, as the rain folds back into silence and the lights fade to gold, breathe deeply. Let your shoulders drop. Let every word you've absorbed tonight settle into your rhythm like ink sinking into paper. This is where mastery begins, not in effort, but in ease. Tomorrow, when you speak, your tone will feel a little steadier. Your pauses will come naturally. You'll find that people lean closer, not because you speak louder, but because they feel something genuine behind every word. And that quiet authenticity, is the truest fluency of all. The night outside has settled into stillness. The rain has stopped, leaving the streets glistening beneath the soft amber lamps. Inside, the library is dim now. Only the faint orange shimmer from the last embers moves across the ceiling like a heartbeat, fading into warmth. You can smell the echo of the day, burnt wood, old paper, and the sweetness of tea left untouched. It feels as though time itself has slowed down to listen. The grandfather's chair sits empty, but his presence remains. His voice lingers like a low note in the air, calm, patient, wise. Wisdom doesn't vanish. It travels, quietly changing rooms. The father sits by the window, the reflection of firelight moving across his face. He isn't reading anymore. He's thinking about words that mattered, about lessons that never needed to be spoken aloud. Near the rug, the boy sleeps with a book open beneath his hand, as if to hold on to the story he was too tired to finish. His breathing is steady, soft, in rhythm with the quiet hum of the library. You can almost imagine his dreams, a swirl of voices, words, laughter, and light, all the sounds of learning turning gently into understanding. In this room, 3 generations exist together in silence, one resting, one reflecting, one dreaming, yet all are connected by something unseen. That invisible thread runs through tone, through kindness, through the way each breath shapes the next. Language isn't only a skill, it's a bridge across time. This is what real fluency means. It isn't perfection, it's presence, it's patience, it's being able to pause and trust that meaning will arrive in its own time. You've been learning that without realizing it. Every sentence tonight, every calm repetition, every moment of still attention has been training your mind to understand rhythm, not just of words, but of peace. Transformation doesn't shout, it whispers. It happens in nights like this, between one heartbeat and the next, between one phrase and another. Tomorrow, you might not even notice the change. You'll simply feel lighter when you speak, clearer when you think, and calmer when you listen. What you practiced tonight wasn't grammar. It was awareness. It was connection. You are now part of the same quiet legacy, the current that runs from the grandfather's patience to the father's calm, to the son's curiosity. It flows through you every time you speak with care. Each thoughtful pause, each word spoken softly but with intention, continues that inheritance. Long after this night fades, the echo of this calm will remain in your tone. Outside, somewhere beyond the fogged windows, a clock begins to chime. The sound doesn't rush you. It simply reminds you that growth continues even in stillness. You breathe in deeply, feeling the rhythm of time expand inside your chest. Every second is enough. Every pause is purposeful. The library fades. The lights dissolve into a soft glow, and the world feels wider again. The last thing you sense is belonging, not to a place, but to a state of peace. You are fluent now in stillness, fluent in thought, fluent in yourself. Sleep peacefully. Let the lessons of tonight settle quietly into your dreams. When morning comes, you'll wake with clarity, not just to speak English, but to speak with warmth, with grace, and with quiet power. Good night, my friend. May your voice carry this calm wherever you go.